I followed my dreams and opened an antique store to have adventures and spend time as a family. Sometimes you have to climb a mountain and open some new doors to find the treasures inside. This is our life, this is our adventure, and this is Curiosity Inc.
So there is an air of promise of something cool to come out of today. I got a call to head downtown, where I'm at right now, and there's a loft, a person who has an apartment. They've been in it since the 1960s, and apparently there's a bunch of really cool antiques, so we're gonna go check it out. Don't know if I'll be able to film inside, but if I do get some cool stuff, I'm not sure what's there, but we'll show you what we get. Some of the old buildings in downtown here stand where old mansions used to be. It's kind of a shame really that when they developed the whole Jasper Avenue area here, it used to be full of beautiful Victorian manors, all gone now with the exception of a couple. And in their place were put up 1960s and 70s skyscrapers. So that's where we're going today, one of the older buildings, one of the older skyscrapers that was put up. It probably displays a beautiful mansion. And yeah, hopefully gonna find some interesting things. Mansion-worthy things, perhaps. So yeah, we're gonna go see what there is to see and hopefully load this vehicle up and get some cool stuff. Well, I am glad that I brought my old ambulance today because it is super packed. The back is full, pretty much with my sight line there. It's packed full of stuff. I guess I'll probably do this at my house because I'll take it into the store tomorrow. But some neat finds, wait till you see. So of all the things I never expected to put in the stretcher was a Venetian sculpture. But we are going to put her in the stretcher and buckle her in. Good thing I brought all the blankets and stretcher with me today. So I got pretty much everything back at the shop. There's a lot of stuff, a lot of paperwork, a lot of ephemera, but there's a few other really cool things. So behind my desk here, right over here, I have piled all the boxes of things which I've brought in the last day here from this house. So we're gonna start going through some of this stuff box by box. I know there's a lot of books and paperwork and stuff, but the right piece can be pretty interesting, maybe worth some money. I don't even know which box to start with. I mean, there's so many. I guess if I start going through the ones that are most obviously books, I can probably get those put away fairly quickly. So now I'll go through some of these and start getting some stuff put away. I emptied out the first box and there's definitely a pile of stuff here to go through. This one's kind of neat, practical flying, and I like that they show an upside down airplane because that's very practical, guys. But judging by the fact it's a biplane, this is probably a pretty old book. Let's see if we can get a date out of it. Yeah, there it is, 1918. That is one of the first, I guess, flight books that there probably would have been. It has the original dust jacket on it. I will have to do a little research on that, but there are some serious collectors into aviation, and that is a very early book. Oh, there's another one here. This must be World War II cadets. How every boy can prepare for aviation service. Condition yourself to be a pilot, bombardier, gunner, or mechanic. Oh, that's neat too. I'll have to make a little stack of airplane related books. Handbook for referees. Okay, so this is for boxing, 1961. So I've got a few boxing pieces here, so I'll keep all the boxing stuff to the side. Apparently, fellow had a relative that was a Hall of Fame boxer, so there's probably going to be, maybe there's some interesting stuff in some of these boxes. Some boxing related paraphernalia. Really cool. Either way, I'm going to keep all the boxing stuff separate. Ration card, so put that in a World War II pile. Just really have to go through and kind of sort all this stuff just so we all, you know, everything has its place. Once it's sorted into its proper category, then we can have it in the right spot. And aside from some books and literature, there were a couple cool sculptural type pieces too, a little outside the normal. So let me show you what they are. One of the more unusual pieces I got today was this. It's a Venetian lamp. Now it's a lantern. She holds a torch which would light up. The torch had fallen apart, so I do have to do a little bit of work to it. So they would depict them in this very classical European sort of way with flowing garments and just stunning detail. I mean, it's iridescent blue paint, iridescent paint. It's just a gorgeous piece. It stands probably close to 7 feet tall, so it's not a small sculpture by any means. And most likely, when she was first made, she probably carried a basket on her hip that went in here. So I may have to do a little bit of research and see if I can find something appropriate to put in her arm. and get the wiring hooked up and working on the top. She needs a little bit of work. The paint is chipping in certain places, but overall a very interesting piece. Would have come out of a very large manor home. In fact, it did at one point here in town, but very cool piece. And then there's this. Probably one of the crazier cigar stands, that's what this is, a cigar stand, that I've ever owned. This was made most likely in Thailand around the turn of the century. They made them and gave them away as gifts to dignitaries. Overall, it's not in bad condition. I mean, it is a skull. It's got a little bit of damage to the one tooth, so it's not perfect. But it is an insanely cool display piece, and if you are someone who enjoys smoking or enjoys oddities, this is a pretty unique item. And even the silver inlay, it's all intact. That's where you'd rest your matches, I suppose, or cigars. So quite a conversation piece and quite a stunning little item. Really glad to have come across that. And there seems to be a lot of old brochures from boxing matches, 1962. This is basketball, however. The basketball rules, 1964. Basketball, of course, being a Canadian invention, probably because it's indoors and keeps people out of the cold. But some people who collect vintage sporting goods items and basketball would find this, and even the boxing stuff, I'm sure, really interesting. I'm going to put this in my pile of sporting good literature. I'm going through some of the piles of books that were in these boxes over here and emptied them out. But some of this stuff is really quite old. This is York Factory, Express in a York Factory. That's one of the very first Hudson Bay trading posts up north, 1827 to 28. And this is from 1912. So, you know, that was not quite 100 years after the fact. But these early accounts of northern Arctic life are probably going to be a really interesting read, really. And I was kind of leafing through it. This even has a map that folds out on the back here, so you can kind of see where they were and what they're talking about. Really, really neat. I guess I'll have to have a historical Canadian or Arctic section here too. Jubilee of Sir Edmund Walker. He was one of the very first presidents of CIBC, which is a Canadian bank up here. So this has to do with that, 1918. I'll put that in the Canadian section. And then for whatever reason they kept looks like the menu from Chop Suey Palace, wherever this was, Ottawa. Must have been good food. And some American stuff. The big trees of California, of course, probably talking about the redwoods, but about the government printing office, 1900. That's pretty early. I guess they were having to figure out what to do with all the big redwoods there, other than film Star Wars there nearly 100 years later. And Ford manual, Model T. Now, the manuals like this are really good to have around because somebody's got a Model T and somebody's going to want the manual. And this is not a reprint. This is the original. Canadian would have been a smaller printing. They wouldn't have made as many of them. So I'm going to put that in make a little car pile over there. Alberta Temperance and Moral Reform League. Well, I'm sure that was a blast. I'm sure that was a important, 1909. Maybe that's what led to Prohibition after and all those other fun things that we had to spend years to undo. Yeah, probably not the most fun for some people. Just some really interesting, accounts. Some of this stuff, this is from 1900. I'm sure these accounts of living with the indigenous peoples would be quite an interesting read nowadays. What's this? Once, music, rock, art, poems. Oh, I see. It's kind of like a counterculture magazine from 1970. I guess these guys, maybe with all the psychedelic stuff going on here, they missed out and didn't go to the Alberta Temperance and Moral Reform League. See, look what happened. Even after all that reform, they ended up coming up with a, crazy 70s and 60s happened. That's actually really cool. A manual for a Massey Harris number 2. A number 2, that's got to be quite an early looking tractor. And it's in perfect shape. If somebody has that Massey, that's a pretty cool thing. That'll go over in our car pile. This looks like it has some age to it. Well, yes, it does. 1789. So I'm going to be very gentle with this. It's in German. I can see that. The something or other. It is music. It's okay. So this is a music book. Really, really neat. Dresden and Leipzig. Commissioned in Germany. Well, that is worth investigating. Something as old as that, 1789, that is certainly getting to the antique realm of things. And when it comes to music, if it's an important piece, an original from that time, might be a pretty special item. And you might look at paperwork and think, oh, it's kind of boring. I think it's pretty fascinating. It's hard to display, but it's really interesting to have. I mean, even some early pieces like this one, which is the mixed copper, silver, and gold ores. This is from 1875. That would have been gold rush era, Klondike gold rush era. So basically how to refine metals. This may have been taken up north where I'm in Canada for someone who is chasing gold mine or trying to strike it rich. Just a piece of that history and a piece of that past that I get to hold in my hand. It's going to take a while to go through, as we have mountains and mountains and mountains of this paperwork and all these boxes. So I'm going to do my best to sort. Having fun so far. And sometimes you have to fact check. Petrified prehistoric human being.
In 1869, George Hall, a cigar maker by trade, went to sleep, frustrated by a pastor's literal interpretation that there were giants walking the earth in the Bible. When he woke up, he concocted a scheme to build a giant to fool the faithful. At a huge expense of nearly $3,000, he acquired the stone, hired a sculptor, and buried his giant. When exhumed, the Cardiff Giant drew massive crowds, and even P.T. Barnum made a copy to monopolize on its fame. A few years later, a second giant with the tail was buried and was uncovered as a hoax. George Hall would pass away into relative obscurity in 1905, but this would go down as one of America's greatest hoaxes.
But this is a brochure from then, and look, it's original, 1877, Colorado. So this actually is from someone who went to go and visit and, go and see this petrified human being. They thought he was real, and it is, part of history. That would be a good oddities thing if somebody collects oddities and things about shams or things like that. That's a pretty interesting little brochure. And you really do have to take a second look at things. At first glance, this would be just somebody's writing. But it says The Tutello Tribe and Language by Horatio Hale, it looks like. Basically, he's captured this lost language in this book. They say that the last person was alive in 1870 who spoke this language. And he has taken their words and put it into this book. So this is an 1880s account of what is now a lost language. And there's so many lost languages, which is pretty sad. But a book like this might be one of very few remaining examples of the language in its entirety. I really need to make sure that there's not a museum or somebody who would need to have or want to have this information. Because as I go through, there's all sorts of great early books from the mid to late 1800s and 1900s in here that have just really good historical value. Going through some of these old letters here, this is a really early one from the province of British Columbia. And then it says who it is, and we command you in every business being laid aside. And it's a legal document, the hour 11 forenoon, same, to testify the truth and give it evidence on our behalf against that person there, I suppose, for murder. So this is a court order for somebody who's being charged for murder from the year 1914, so 1914. Really early. I wonder what happened with that. Whether they were tried and hung or whether they were imprisoned. There's all sorts of letters and documents here. Some of them are really interesting. Some are war correspondence, letters. And I mean, you look at the condition. I should really be getting some gloves on with dealing with some of these really early pieces. But this is from the Department of Militia and Defense from 1915. So this is World War I, stamped and sealed. And so it's a widow or a wife inquiring about payments for her husband, and it's saying to direct their questions elsewhere. But it is signed, of course. World War I paperwork, World War I correspondence. I know there are guys that collect that kind of stuff too, and I just hope it goes to a good home. Here's another nice old book, the National Portrait Gallery. Let's have a look, see if we can get a date. Oh, there's a piece of paper in here. Let's see if we can take that out. When is this from? The Weekly The Weekly Exposition, Brantford, Ontario, October 22nd, 1886. Well, Canada was only about 20 years old at that point. And this has got to be an old catalog. You can kind of tell from the way that they're dressed. Look at the ladies. 1800s, let's see, 1901. Still super old. Oh. Mary Kotchuk, his message. You really do have to flip through every page. There's stuff sometimes tucked inside. I've not found any dollar bills or money or anything like that, but little things like this are a nice little keepsake. Going through some of the other boxes, and there was a couple sweaters. Now, these are the original 1950s boxing club sweaters that he had. Lots of patches down the arms too. Recreation Boxing Wrestling Club, Edmonton, 1954 winner. And yeah, apparently he was is a Hall of Fame boxer. Here's his robe. It's like a purple silk robe, boxing robe. The original crest on the back. Very, very neat piece. Really hard to find this 40s sports memorabilia, 40s and 50s sports stuff that's still intact. And I guess at one point he was also a judge at the Commonwealth Games. And here's his judge's blazer and tie to go along with that. I think that was in New Zealand back at the time. So all kinds of neat things. I really love the old clothing. A couple little moth holes on the back, but overall it's not bad. Royal Glenora, which is sort of a sports club, a club here in town. So we're talking about all the different things you could do there. Curling, tennis, badminton, skating. Kind of a neat patch. Good local piece. An old Saturday Evening Post from 1917. That is an old one. And let's see who the artist is. Norman Rockwell. That's pretty good. That's going to be one of his first. A lot of the Rockwell ones you normally see are from kind of the 30s, 40s era. 1917 is pretty darn early for him. He's still developing his style. Let's see how many others we have. There's a whole bunch of them here. I don't know how many are Rockwell. Let's see. That one is 1919. Norman Rockwell. Maybe that's why they kept all these. These are the Rockwell ones. 1919. No, that's different. Last name's Parker. It's hard to make out. Cushman Parker, perhaps? I'm not too familiar with them as an artist. It's another Rockwell there. So there's a good number of Norman Rockwell. Have to look those guys up, but early Saturday Evening Posts like this in good condition, which these are, must have at least a decent value. Just an amazing amount of really cool and really rare stuff came out of this place. I'm still going through the boxes, and it's probably going to take me the rest of the week to get all the paperwork filed and sorted out. There's just a lot of great history, so it's going to take time, but I'm really happy with what I found. Love the tiger skull ashtray. That's so cool and so weird. I'm sure somebody will want it. And the lady lamp, I mean, she's 8 feet tall. What a great grand piece. So thanks very much for watching this adventure. Lots of neat things. And if you're ever in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, come up and see us. We have an actual store. As you can see all around me here, there's all kinds of cool stuff. We're always getting new things. And if you haven't subscribed already, subscribe to our channel, because we do go out and find cool stuff, and we do sell it. So if you like antiques, you like adventure, and you like travel, we do all that on our channel. So check us out online at curiosityedmonton.ca, on Instagram at CuriosityInc, YEG, and on YouTube, of course, where you're at, and on Facebook under Curiosity Incorporated. All the ways, every way you can think of, you can get a hold of us. You guys have a wonderful day. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you all soon. Bye for now.